Calibrating carbon-14, really young, dead, and feathered dinosaurs, and a new rant. All this and more coming right up in this edition of Genesis Week. And welcome to this episode of Genesis Week, the weekly program of creationary commentary on news, views, and events pertaining to the Origins controversy, answering your questions and questioning your answers. Proudly brought to you by the supporters of CORE Ottawa, Citizens for Origins Research and Education, now carried on the Christianema Network, Christian cinema at its finest. Excellence in pirate broadcasting we set up in the Mineral King mine, and if you can tell us the spelling mistake on the warning sign coming into the mine, write to us and the first person with the right answer gets a free DVD. We continue to bring you the information the anti-creationists don't want you to see or hear, and we continue to give glory to the Creator while doing it. We believe God gave you an intelligently designed brain for a reason, and He expects you to use it. Remember, you can find us in cyberspace at Wazooloo.com, that's me, or at GenesisWeek.com, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel and get extras like Crevo rants and full interviews with our guests. I'm your host, Ian Juby. Our first story this week involves the alleged calibration of carbon-14 with a lake bed on a Japanese island. Now, the lake is called Suigetsu, and there are fine layers of sediment deposited in the lake each year. Now, these layers are called varves, and are assumed to form at a rate of 1 per year. Now, after 2 decades of research and attempts to accurately count the layers, researchers claim to have documented over 50,000 years of annual layers. They then used these layers to calibrate radiocarbon levels in the past, thus hopefully giving us a very accurate baseline with which to use carbon-14 dating. The report was carried by Science magazine, and a commentary in the same issue by Paula Reimer noted that this record stretches back over the full length of the radiocarbon age scale. Now, there are several issues at play here. The assumption that the varves are indeed annual layers, in fact, the reason the research has taken decades is because of the difficulties in trying to determine which layers represent an actual year when we know that past events can produce more than 1 layer per year. Now, do not underestimate the significance of this one fact. As Reimer noted in her commentary, this record is as good as or better than the Greenland ice cores. Now, it's interesting she brought that up, because there are some valuable lessons about such assumptions to be learned from the Greenland ice cores. Now, the Greenland ice cores are simply samples that were taken of the glaciers in Greenland, which again form in allegedly annual layers by the accumulation of snow and sleet compressed into a big, thick sheet of ice, sometimes over 3 kilometers, that's 10,000 feet thick. A core sample is just simply a tube which is drilled into the ice, and then the ice sample is removed from inside the tube. Now, when one looks at the ice samples, you see these alleged annual layers in the ice. The Greenland ice core is alleged to represent some 110,000 years of annual ice layers. Now, already, such an age poses a problem for the biblical account of creation and a young Earth of 6,000 years old. Is the Bible wrong? Now, if we do some simple math, assuming 3,000 meters of ice, that works out to about 2.7 centimeters, or about 1 inch, of ice accumulating per year. But once again, the problem is the assumptions involved. In 1942, a squadron of American P-38 Lightning aircraft and 2 B-17 Flying Fortresses flew from a secret military base in Greenland, heading to England to join the war against the Nazi regime. Now, they had to refuel in Iceland, but en route, they found out that the airfield at Iceland was socked in by fog, and they wouldn't be able to land. So, they turned back to their base in Greenland. Unfortunately, they soon found out that the airfield they left from had also become socked in, and they were running out of fuel. The squadron decided to land on the ice fields of Greenland. All but one of the aircraft performed gear-up belly landings with minimal damage to the aircraft, which were abandoned right where they landed. The crews were all rescued by dog sled several days later. In 1980, a U.S. airplane dealer by the name of Patrick Epps got the idea to go out and salvage these vintage aircraft. After several years and a lot of money spent, they finally located what they thought were the aircraft underneath the ice. It actually took specialized radar to see through the ice. They were in for the shock of their lives. The aircraft were buried under some 75 meters, 250 feet of ice. Obviously, the assumptions of deep time were just plain wrong, as this represented an accumulation of 1.6 meters per year, not the assumed 2.7 centimeters per year. Now, using those kind of figures, you could accumulate the 3,000 meter Greenland ice sheet in less than a measly 2,000 years. One of the P-38s was salvaged from underneath the ice, and you can see this aircraft, nicknamed Glacier Girl, at air shows around the world. Keep your eye open for it. The point I want to make here is the assumptions behind these dating methods that are used to calibrate other dating methods, like what is assumed to be annual layers in a lake in Japan, with which to calibrate carbon-14 dating. Now, we already know that multiple varves can be formed in 1 year, so calibrating the unknown past with an unknown past would seem rather unreliable, to say the least. Nevertheless, let's give it to them. Let's assume that their ages and calibration are correct. As was mentioned briefly in the last two shows, carbon-14 testing has been performed on multiple samples from deep within the rock record, including dinosaur and mammoth bones. In fact, I've excavated and prepped mammoths and mastodons with my good friend Joe Taylor, who had mammoth bones carbon dated. Hugh Miller and the folks over at CRSEF had dinosaur bones also carbon dated. The dinosaur bones should have no carbon-14 in them, as the carbon-14 breaks down completely in less than 100,000 years, yet the dinosaur bones were supposed to be around 100 million years old. Instead, some of the dinosaur bones came back with younger carbon-14 ages than the mammoths. Yet the rock and soil samples around the dinosaur and mammoth bones showed lower carbon-14 content than the bones. Obviously, this was not modern contamination. So if the carbon-14 dating method becomes even more refined and accurate, and dinosaur bones are returning carbon-14 ages of between 5,000 and 50,000 years old, does that mean that the dinosaurs are not 100 million years old? I can accept that. How about you? On that note, Dr. Mary Schweitzer did it again. Now, you might remember Dr. Schweitzer, who inherited perhaps dubious honor of publishing on T-Rex blood found in a fossil leg bone in Montana a few years back. Her and her team also documented soft tissue inside the bone that was still soft and stretchy. Well, this past week at the Society for Vertebrate Paleontology and a publication in the journal Bone, Dr. Schweitzer revealed more research on bone cells found in dinosaur bones. Now, those cells just simply should not be in 75 million year old dinosaur bone. End of discussion. Dr. Schweitzer and the others never stopped to question the assumptions of deep time, in spite of the evidence, not because of it. Now, if the dinosaur bones are only a few thousand years old, as per the biblical timeline, there is no problem. But there is a huge problem assuming the bones are millions of years old. There has been copious amounts of study on decay rates of animals and humans in forensic studies. Science which is so solid, it stands up in a court of law and people are jailed and executed on this evidence. These decades of research show that it is flat out impossible for cells to be preserved for millions and millions of years. In fact, just this past week, one of the more fascinating and gruesome videos you'll ever see was released by Simon Fraser University in British Columbia. A pig corpse was put in a cage and sunk to about 300 meters depth, about 1,000 feet, in the ocean. Now, even in a cage to keep large predators out, the pig was reduced to bones in 4 days. Decay and rot happens quickly, unless, of course, unusual conditions occur, such as the dinosaurs getting buried rapidly in a global flood. Now, what I found especially interesting was the comment made by the pig decay research team to New Scientist magazine. After they brought the big pig bones to the surface, they discovered the bones were mysteriously jet black. Now, there are still many things to be learned here, but I know that any other paleontologists will know this. We encounter jet black bones at paleontological excavations all the time. What's the connection? Good question. But anyone in the know understands that the evidence that dinosaurs died in water is loud and overwhelming. But I'll leave that for another day with Crevo Rant number 17, Dinosaurs and Asteroids. In the meantime, we have a couple of other stories to cover coming out of the Society for Vertebrate Paleontology annual meeting, referred to in short as the SVP. A paper by Habib et al. Was presented at the SVP detailing their study of a famous feathered dinosaur fossil known as Microraptor. Now, before we analyze the report, I think it would be educational to sit back with your bucket of fried chicken and watch Crevo Rant number 46.
We're told with much zeal and authority that the birds evolved from the dinosaurs. In fact, we're given a lot of evidence for this alleged fact. Now, just how good is that evidence? Did you unwittingly have T-Rex for dinner last night and think it tasted an awful lot like chicken? Or is avian evolution for the birds? How's it going, eh? First thing I'd like to point out is the assumption that evolution is true, and the assumption that birds evolved from dinosaurs, and thus the impact that has on the interpretation of the evidence. For example, when we head on over to the ever so reliable Wikipedia, we find out that the definition between dinosaur and bird has been blurred.
A majority of modern paleontologists reject the traditional style of classification in favor of phylogenetic nomenclature, which requires that all descendants of a single common ancestor must be included in a group for that group to be natural. Birds are thus considered by most modern scientists to be dinosaurs, and dinosaurs are therefore not extinct. Birds are classified by most paleontologists as belonging to the subgroup Maniraptora, which are coelosaurs, which are theropods, which are saurischians, which are dinosaurs.
Well, isn't that convenient? If it isn't a bird, call it a bird anyway. Look, just because you call a dinosaur a bird does not make it a bird.
Want some?
Oh, sorry.
Awkward.
Using that kind of logic, it's just as logical to call a lion a dog. It is just as outrageous to call a dinosaur a bird as it is to call the duck-billed platypus a bird. Now, the Dino to bird theorists will point out similarities or homologies between the structures of the birds and the dinosaurs. However, they will only point out the similarities that they seem to want you to know about.
For example, the Saurischian dinosaurs are so named because of their lizard-like hips. Saur for lizard, ischian for hip. The Saurischians include dinosaurs like the T-Rex and the Apatosaurus. Some have feet similar to birds, others have feet like an elephant. Some have small arms, others have 4 large legs. They all have hips like a lizard. Then there's the ornithischians, ornith for bird, ischian for hip. They are so named because they have hips like a bird. The ornithischians include dinosaurs like the hadrosaurs. Some have feet similar to birds, some even have a bill like a duck, and they all have hips similar to a bird. Now, which of these groups do you think the birds would evolve from? The saurischians or the ornithischians? You probably guessed the ornithischians, but the Dino de Bird theorists picked the saurischians.
Obviously, homology is a useless tool for evolution. The Dino de Bird theorists only use it when they think it supports their case, and ignore it when it doesn't support their evolutionary assumptions. I cover the failure of homology in Crevo Rant number 2. Now, what about those dinosaurs evolving feathers? Aren't those dinosaurs that are evolving into birds? First of all, you need to understand these dinosaurs weren't found with feathers, they were found with organic artifacts that were interpreted to be proto-feathers, the precursor of the feather. Right? But wait! The evolutionary sequence is backwards! Archaeopteryx had fully formed feathers, while Bapiosaurus, Sinosauropteryx, and Shuvuia had proto-feathers. According to the evolutionary timescale, the dinosaurs then were de-evolving feathers. Other evolutionary experts have suggested that the dinosaurs who did have feathers were just simply flightless birds. Other fossils have been found which look just like modern birds. Proto-Avis, for example, looks just like the modern blackbird, but that fossil was considered controversial. Why? Because it was found in the Texas Triassics, which according to the evolutionary timescale was before the dinosaurs. Obviously, you cannot be your grandfather's father, so we got a problem here. Yeah. Wait a minute! Fossils aren't controversial. Fossils are just fossils. They're dead things. The only thing controversial here is evolutionary theory. Here in Canada, the fossil footprints of a wading bird was found in Carboniferous rocks. But Sternberg wrote in 1933 that there was little possibility of these having been made by wading birds. Why? Because the rocks the footprints were found in were Carboniferous. And according to evolutionary theory, birds had not yet evolved. Wait a minute here. This is not controversial. Evolutionary theory is controversial, and it doesn't line up with the fossil evidence. So completely modern fossil birds were found in rocks older than the dinosaurs. And if we take the fossil evidence at face value, the dinosaurs, if anything, were de-evolving feathers, the opposite of evolution. When confronted with these facts, the Dino de Bird theorists then pull a complete about-face and claim that no, these weren't dinosaurs evolving into birds, they were sister species which became extinct. They didn't quite make it. What a convenient story that is. The fossil dinosaurs that were actually found with fossil hair-like structures, which many evolutionary scholars interpreted to be collagen fibers from decaying flesh, and not proto-feathers at all. In fact, according to a Royal Society article, a fossil ichthyosaur was found with the same hair-like structures. An ichthyosaur can be best described as a marine dinosaur that looks an awful lot like a dolphin. So, are we going to claim that a dolphin-like creature also evolved into birds? So it turns out the only evidence that dinosaurs evolved into birds was based on the assumption that dinosaurs evolved into birds, and using that assumption to interpret the evidence. The evidence isn't controversial, the theory of evolution is controversial. Creation in a young Earth, however, has no conflict with the evidence, which has birds being created about 6,000 years ago. Well, if the Bible's right about that, what else is it right about? The Bible says that this earth has been corrupted by the sin of mankind, and thus God is going to destroy this heaven and earth and make a new heaven and new earth. The problem is he can't allow even one drop of sin into that new heaven and new earth. Otherwise, it would corrupt it as well. So we got a problem. This is where the Lord Jesus Christ comes in, who lived a perfect, sinless life and died in place of sinners like you and I. And that allows us to be seen in the sight of God as sinless. And Christ has provided a free way for us into the new heaven and new earth. But you must give him your life in exchange. Why don't you give him your life today?
blurring of the lines between birds and dinosaurs has left even some evolutionary skeptics flabbergasted. This is the whole reason why you will see evolutionary researchers referring to some dinosaurs as avian and other dinosaurs as non-avian. As paleontologist Larry Martin once told CNN back in 1998, you have to put this into perspective. To the people who wrote the feathered dinosaur paper, the chicken would be a feathered dinosaur. So even if there actually were feathered dinosaurs, so what? This is not a slam dunk evidence for evolution. There is incredible variety the creator has put into life. He even reused a bill on the duck-billed platypus, and that does not make it a bird. So now let's take a look at the two stories that appeared this past week about alleged feathered dinosaurs. Now, assuming Microraptor was in fact a dinosaur and not a bird, and could actually fly, Habib and et al. Presented a paper at the SVP claiming that Microraptor's feathered legs could act as a second set of wings, enabling the dinosaur to take really sharp corners in flight. Now, the only point I would make here is, so what? Even if it did, how is it not just a really well-designed bird? I'm ignoring the multiple assumptions being made here, which other evolutionary scholars are not ignoring, evolutionary scholars such as Kevin Padian, who is arguing that the study focused on gliding when he contends the forelimbs were for flapping. Now, frankly, unless we saw this thing flying for ourselves, there's not a whole lot you can say, because science is based on observation. A second paper came out in Science this past week from Zelenitsky et al., documenting what appears to be the first feathered dinosaur in North America. The Orthomimimus specimens were excavated in Alberta, Canada, one of which is already on display in the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Drumheller, Alberta. And the newly reported fossils will be on display in the Tyrrell later on this fall. Now, while I obviously disagree with the evolutionary conclusions portrayed at the Royal Tyrrell Museum, I highly recommend that you visit it. And then after you're done there, take a short drive just north of there to Canada's first permanent creation museum, the Big Valley Creation Science Museum. Now, in the case of Zelenitsky's paper, it would appear that this is a genuine feathered animal, as it appeared to have quill anchors in the bones. However, here we go again with the blurring of distinction between dinosaurs and birds. Ornithomimus is remarkably like the ostrich, and was probably nothing more than a flightless bird that was interpreted within the evolutionary construct to be a dinosaur, which is then claimed to be evidence that dinosaurs evolved into birds, which is claimed to support evolution. And so the circular reasoning goes round and round. You dizzy yet? It's not a dinosaur. If it was alive today, we'd call it a large, flightless bird. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Funny, fast, and furious. Ian's Crevo rants cover a multitude of topics in an easy-to-understand, comical way. Complicated subjects that normally make your brain hurt a lot less when Ian explains them, while wearing his anti-government mind-reading equipment. Have questions about carbon-14 dating, natural selection, thermodynamics, or what on earth is he doing there? 3 volumes of rants on DVD. Take your pick for $15 each, plus shipping and handling, or order all 3 as a package and save yourself $10. Order online today at Ian's Bookstore.
Woohoo! Mail for me? I wonder what it tastes like. In response to our What a Blast episode last week, Move Order wrote in, "So stupid it hurts." YouTuber Oren Otter then replied with a simple solution for his pain. Keep watching. You'll get smarter. Then you won't hurt so much. I seem to be getting a lot of people writing in from the UK lately. Hi Ian, always looking forward to seeing a new video on the Wazooloo channel. It's better than the latest blockbuster movie. Keep up the good work. Thank you for your videos. I just watched your show on the Miracle Channel and I'm hooked. I love the Bible and Jesus is my Lord and Savior, and I love learning about creation, but I hate that most television takes the evolution viewpoint. Your show is a breath of fresh air, and it's also very entertaining. I can't believe someone did a study on why humans don't have more hair, and they think it's because of bed bugs? Like my 2-year-old says, seriously? Thanks for the info on Russell Humphrey's book. However, I feel compelled to ask the question that many anti-creationists bring up when discussing your views and that of others like Humphrey's. How can we possibly believe you when you talk about the origins of life when you aren't a biologist / geneticist / chemist, etc., or astronomer cosmologist? This is the favorite tactic of the pointy-headed elite. We can't believe you because you don't know what you're talking about. Please comment. Sure, I get that a lot, actually. Now, there are several skeptics on YouTube that I really appreciate, actually, because even if we disagree, they make rational arguments at least. Now, it's interesting to note that the skeptics will want to play up my apparent lack of a degree as nullifying anything I've said, but they'll listen to Charles Darwin, whose only degree was in theology, and he was a heretic by those standards. Your education has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not you are correct. Now, it's also interesting you bring up, you mentioned Dr. Russell Humphreys, because even though he has a PhD, he is rejected by the skeptics who claim that his degree was given by a degree mill, which is utter nonsense. So, if you are a creationist and you do not have a degree, your words are invalid. If you do have a degree, your words are still invalid, and the university that gave you your degree should revoke your degree. This is all very clear ad hominem fallacy. They attack the person instead of rationally responding to the arguments at hand. So, let them question my education. Because to me, that speaks volumes of the person. They are desperately looking for an out. With regards to the non-evolution of the reproductive system, Son of the Only Wise God wrote in, an experienced public nurse licensed to teach nursing to students at a Toronto hospital told me once that it took 23 different hormones to bring in conception and successful attachment to the uterus. How marvelous that each stage of such a complex process works perfectly. But by accident? Hardly. Well, that's it for this week's show. I'm Ian Juby signing off and hoping you'll join us again next Genesis Week. Remember, you can send in your comments, questions, and hate mail to us in a number of ways. You can email us at comments@genesisweek.com, or you can send us a tweet at GenesisWeek, or you can go to genesisweek.com, which is our YouTube channel, find the appropriate show, and leave a comment. Remember the words of our Creator, the Lord Jesus Christ, who said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me. We'll see you on the flip side.
We need your support to help keep this program on the air. You can help by making a tax-deductible donation to Core Ottawa, Canada North Post Office Box 72075, Ottawa, Ontario, K2K2P4. You can also sign up for Ian's newsletter, detailing current research and news items at ianjuby.org.